What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be having a deep look at two fairly comparable assault rifles in Warzone, and these are the CR-56 AMAX and the relatively new C58. Both of these guns are moderate fire rate assault rifles with a pretty high damage potential to the upper torso, and they're also quite accurate. Previously, the AMAX was absolutely one of the top dogs in Warzone. Most of the top players were using the AMAX at one point. And now, it seems like that's sort of fallen out of favor, and now, at least within the context of this style of assault rifle where it's high damage, moderate fire rate, the C58 has definitely come out to play quite a bit more than the AMAX. So without further ado, let's just hop right into the comparison here, and we'll start it off with damage. And looking at our maximum damage range, so this is our up-close damage, the CR56 AMAX deals the same amount of damage to the limbs and the lower torso. However, we get an upper torso multiplier of 38. Whereas with the C58, we have separate values for all of them. We deal 37 damage to the limbs, 40 damage to the lower torso, and 44 damage to the upper torso. And what this means for our shots to kill to the upper torso against an enemy with 3 armor plates and full health is the CR56 AMAX can kill in 7 shots, whereas the C58 kills in 6 shots. It's also worth noting that with the AMAX, only 2 out of those 7 shots need to hit the upper torso. The rest of them can hit anywhere in the body. And then with the C58, 3 out of our 6 shots have to hit the upper torso, and the rest can hit the lower torso. If we're mixing in limb shots, you may have to mix in another upper torso shot or 2 to maintain that 6-shot kill potential. So that's what the damage looks like at close ranges. Now let's have a look at the longer ranges, in the minimum damage ranges for these guns, which we will look at ranges in a little bit. With the AMAX, we deal 34 damage to the upper torso and 31 damage everywhere else. And then with the C58, we deal 34 damage to the limbs, 37 to the lower torso, and 40 to the upper torso. And what this means for our 3-plate time to kill is with the AMAX, it's an 8-shot kill, and only 1 of those shots has to hit the upper torso. The rest can hit anywhere else in the body. Whereas with the C58, we get a 7-shot kill potential, and at least 2 of those shots have to hit the upper torso. The rest can hit limbs. However, it's also worth noting that it's still going to be a 7-shot kill with lower torso shots. So at longer ranges, the C58 gets its best time to kill potential anywhere in the torso, whereas the AMAX does require at least 1 bullet to hit the upper torso. Now, at the end of the day, this extra forgiveness you get with the C58, being able to hit the lower torso shots and still get that best time to kill, it doesn't matter all that much because, of course, you're going to hit at least 1 bullet to the upper torso with the AMAX. It would actually be hard to not hit an upper torso shot, but I just wanted to point that out because I found that to be interesting. So now that we have that established, let's move on to the next step here, and this is going to be our time to kill as well as our rate of fire and range. And when it comes to our range values, when these are stacked with all of the attachments that most people are going to use, so this is going to be the monolithic or agency suppressor combined with the longest barrel, we actually have almost identical range values. With the AMAX, we get a 36-meter range, whereas the C58 is a 37-meter range, so they're essentially equal in this area. Then when it comes to rate of fire, the AMAX does have a noticeably higher fire rate than the C58 at 632 rounds per minute, which means it's technically a little bit more forgiving. If you miss a shot, it's not going to be as punishing to your time to kill compared to if you miss a shot with the C58. However, taking a look at our time to kill values, the C58 does kill a little bit faster than the AMAX at close range as well as long range. Now, this isn't a major difference between these two. They're going to be very competitive with each other when it comes to time to kill, but just know the C58 does have the advantage when it comes to time to kill, and it actually has a very impressive time to kill at both range values. Up close, this kills very fast, and at longer ranges, assuming you're hitting your shots, this also kills quite fast. So far, it's actually looking fairly equal between these two, although I would say the C58 has a little bit of an advantage over the AMAX when it comes to raw killing potential. But now, from here on out, the comparison is going to be with some common setups that you would use with these particular guns, and I tried to select the closest comparable combinations. So with the AMAX, we're using the monolithic suppressor, the Zodiac barrel, the 3X optic, commando foregrip, and the 45-round mags, whereas with the C58, we've got the agency suppressor, the task force barrel, the 3X sight, the field agent grip, and the 55-round mag. Of course, you could play around with these attachment combinations a little bit. I just wanted to select 2 attachment combinations that are very common and that are also very comparable to each other across both guns. And with those setups in mind, let's have a look at their recoil. And keep in mind, these are 25-round recoil plots just because the C58 has a standard 25-round magazine, and I just equalized that with the AMAX as well. But as you can see here, they're actually very comparable when it comes to recoil. Both of them are quite accurate. They kicked pretty much straight upward, although the AMAX has a little bit more horizontal deflection to the left, whereas the C58 does deflect horizontally to the right, but only very, very slightly. If I had to say, I'd say the C58 is just slightly better than the AMAX when it comes to recoil, but not by a large margin anymore after the nerf we got to the C58 as well as the barrel attachments later last week. So while I would consider the C58 to be slightly better, they are really comparable, and I wouldn't say it's a massive advantage recoil-wise to be using the C58 over the AMAX. And this is where I wanted to get into some handling and movement stats. Again, keeping in mind this is with the setups that I've already outlined for you. When it comes to our aim down sight time, that AMAX build will aim down sight in 400 milliseconds, whereas the C58 is noticeably slower at 467 milliseconds. So the advantage goes to the AMAX there. Then when it comes to sprint out time, that's equal between both of these at 267 milliseconds. And then finally, for our movement speeds, the AMAX is noticeably slower than the C58. And this is a very common trend that we see with Cold War weapons. They do tend to have faster movement speeds overall when you stack attachments on them. So when it comes to this, if you want a long-range build that's a little bit faster at aiming down sight, slightly snappier, the AMAX is a little bit better. On the other end, though, if you want something that has better movement speed, you're definitely better off with the C58 over the AMAX. So I don't know if that fully equalizes. It really depends on what you're looking for and what you're going for with your setup, but there are pros and cons to each of these guns. But finally, let's get into a very important stat in Warzone, and this is bullet velocity. And when it comes to this, if we're just looking at the base gun with no attachments equipped, the AMAX has a bullet velocity of around 475 meters per second, whereas the C58 is around 630 meters per second. So clearly the C58 has an advantage here. And that advantage is only magnified once we start including attachments. With the AMAX, the best velocity we can get with that setup that I looked at earlier, this is around 950 meters per second. And this is actually quite slow for a fully kitted assault rifle in Warzone. And when we compare that to the C58, we can get a bullet velocity value of 1250 meters per second, which is very noticeably better. And when it comes to those longer range fights, you're definitely going to be noticing that the C58 is going to be hitting your shot more precisely, especially against moving targets. And you're simply not going to have to account for bullet drop and bullet leading nearly as much as you will with the AMAX. So unlike many of the other differences we've seen so far between these guns, which have been fairly minor, this is actually a very big and noticeable difference for longer range engagements. And as a result, I consider this to be the primary deciding factor between these. In most situations, the C58 is simply the better option. And it's unfortunate because if we were to equalize the bullet velocity values between these two, it would be a much closer call. The C58 would still likely come out on top, just barely, but that difference in bullet velocity really just seals the deal here. The C58 is clearly better than the AMAX, although I did want to point out the AMAX still isn't a bad gun. I understand why people aren't really using it anymore, since there are better alternatives now, but it's not like the AMAX is completely unusable anymore. It's still a pretty solid gun, very, very usable, just not quite as solid as the C58, in my opinion. And with that, I'd like to hear from you guys in the comment section below. Between these two assault rifles, which one do you think is better, the C58 or the CR56 AMAX? Just let me know those thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.